Hola y bienvenidos a Elemental Codes de Language School. Me llamo José y vamos a continuar con lección 1. Vamos a continuar hablando sobre el alfabeto. Y esta es parte 6 y vamos a hablar sobre la información importante en este video. Y puedes encontrar este video y otros recursos en nuestro sitio de web, que es www.elementalcodes.com. Alright, so hello and welcome to Elemental Codes Language School. My name is Joseph, and this is lesson 1. We're continuing with the alphabet, and in this one, and this is part 6, and we're going to cover important information. And you can find this video and other resources on our website, which is www.elementalcodes.com. We're going to continue to add resources to our website, and I've got some news that I'm going to promote after the quiz. So we have this one, and then we have a quiz, and then I'm going to promote some information that I'm going to end up doing, because I know that there are people out there who are at different levels. And so let's get started with this one. Hopefully it won't be as long as the other videos, and we'll continue. All right, so we already covered the alphabet, las vocales, los diptongos, and now we're getting into important information. And then the next video will be a quiz. This is a small quiz, nothing too big. It's just the alphabet, it's the basics, but I've given you more information than you probably want. But I'm going to also do something after the quiz. I'm going to do a separate video where I'm going to explain what my plans are for the future videos. So we're going to get into useful information, useful info. And as I've said in the other videos, the vowels, unlike in English, they're always pronounced the same, e, I, o, u. And there is an accent that happens on most of them. That is a line from the bottom left on the top of the vowel to the top right. But there is one other accent, and it's called a diaresis. You'll see it on the U. Generally, in words that are borrowed, like naive, you'll see it on an I. Spanish, you'll see it on the U. And it's the U with the 2 dots above it. So in the word, for example, guerra, you notice that it doesn't form a diphthong. In fact, what it does, it's not guerra, it's guerra. So what happens is that when the U follows a G, the G becomes a G. It's kind of like with the Q and the U, where the Q will always have a U after it, but it's K. So in this case, after the G, it changes the G to a G sound, because if the U wasn't there, it would be an English H sound. It'd be guerra, which is not a word. So what happens is that in words like guerra, where there's a U after the G, it just makes the G a G sound. And the U is kind of like non-existent. That's the only thing that it does, is it makes the G. So if this didn't have a U, it'd be guerra. So with the U, it's guerra. But with this diaresis, what happens is that in words like vergüenza, it actually causes the U to be pronounced as a diphthong. Vergüenza. Pinguino. Pinguino is a penguin. Vergüenza is shame. So that's what the diaresis does. It allows the U, because the U is just going to make the G a G sound. And in words like vergüenza, it's going to cause the U to be pronounced in a diphthong. And the word like pinguino. So it's in English, when you first hear it, it's going to be like a W sound. Gwen. Guino, Guenza. But that's just the diphthong being pronounced. Whereas in guerra, it's not being pronounced, because it's as if the U doesn't exist. The letter Y is pronounced as E if it's by itself, or it can be pronounced as a consonant, like yo, as in the word yo, like a Y sound. But when it's by itself and it's pronounced as E, it means the word and in English, and. Okay, and then the letter O, all right, if it's by itself, it means or. So E means and O means or. So what happens in Spanish is that in a normal sentence, there will be E or it'll be O. But if the Y comes before a word that starts with the same sound, and the O comes before a word that starts with the same sound, the Y will change to an E, which will be pronounced A, and the O will change to a U, which will be pronounced U. I don't remember how long it took for this to actually come up in any of my Spanish classes, but there was times where I was like, what is that? And so this is kind of something I just wanted to let you know, to let you be aware of. In this sentence, this is the normal E usage. All right, so quiero que me escuches y vayas. Quiero que me escuches y vayas. So it's pronounced as E in this case. Now, it's going to come before an E sound. It doesn't necessarily have to be the I vowel. It just has to come before the E sound, because sometimes there might be an H, and H's are silent. It still makes the E sound, so therefore it's still going to change. All right, so quiero que me escuches e ir a la tienda. Quiero que me escuches e ir a la tienda. And so there's a lot of this that happened. From what I've been taught, what I've heard is that it's due to pronunciation. So there's rules that they want to try to avoid things in pronunciation, and in this case it's a double EE sound. All right. The E sound follows, so the Y changes to an E. So if you see this is Y. All right, and the same happens with the O, which means or. So the normal example is necesitas ir o calmarte. Necesitas ir o calmarte. Right? Versus necesitas ir u obtener las formas correctas. Necesitas ir u obtener las formas correctas. So the O will change to a U. So this is why that happens. It's for pronunciation purposes. So the letters in Spanish are noticed pronounced as English letters. Therefore, you just barely touch on them and go. So B and V, we've gone over this before. We've talked about this before. So they are essentially identical in pronunciation. So when you're spelling something out, you might be asked, is it B larga or B corta? Is it B de burro or B de vaca? Or B alta or B baja? This is the case in Central America, but in Spain they use the term ube, so it's not really a problem necessarily in a lot of Spain. Che and Lie were originally considered letters in the Spanish alphabet, and they still are considered letters, but in the dictionary this caused confusion, and so they took the letters out so that foreigners, when they're looking up words, would not get confused. And I gave the example that cinco would come before chavo, and people couldn't find out that there was his own separate letter, and so they were looking it up under C instead of CH. So they took it out. These are still letters though, but they're just not in today's dictionaries as their own separate letters. They're added in with C and L. So double R, although it's not its own letter, it still has a name, R, okay, and it makes the trill sound. So what happens with the double R is that in some places, for example, Puerto Rico, the double R is pronounced more like an 8, and the single R is pronounced more like an L. So mujer would be mujer, and then Rico, Puerto Rico, this would be Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico. So this happens mainly in the Caribbean. It also can happen in the Dominican Republic. But this is something that we wanted to address with our website. We wanted to talk about the variations that exist in the different Spanishes, because when I first started learning, I thought all Spanish was the same. And if you get in a discussion with certain people, they will say, oh, all Spanish is the same. I've had these arguments, and I said, yeah, there's a basic neutral form of Spanish, but not all of it is the same. There's variations that occur between countries. There's different words that are used, there's different pronunciation, there's dialectical variations. It's a linguistical thing that we were taught in university, so it's not all the same. Say, just like when English is a K sound when it's in front of an A, O, or U, A, O, or U. And in Central and South America, it will sound like an S sound when it's in front of an E or an I, as in cinco or cero. But in Spain, if it comes before an E or an I, generally you will hear a TH sound. So cinco becomes cinco and cero becomes cero. And if you watch movies and they're from Spain, you will hear this. You will hear this a lot. And they talk really fast in Spain. All right, they will make a softer English sound. It's more of a DTH kind of sound. So, for example, Pedro, Pedro, Pedro. And then pedo. Pedo is a fart. Pedro is Peter. So if you need to know how to say fart, it's pedo. G will make the G sound in front of an A, O, or U, A, O, O, U. And then it'll sound like an English H in front of an I or an E. All right, so the examples are gota, gato, gustar versus gente, girasol. Right, H is always silent unless it's a part of the CH letter. So if you see a C in front of it, it's going to be ch. But if it's anywhere else by itself, it is silent. So this is not hola, it's hola. This is not hablar, it's hablar. H is always silent in Spanish. All right, J is equivalent to the English H, as in Jose, which is my name. Me llamo Jose. And Jose means Joseph in English. In case you're wondering. All right, K and W were not letters, but they were from borrowed words like karate or waffle. We've gone over this. Double L is like a Y sound. So double L is pronounced like a Y in many countries. However, there are variations of it. There is a variation where it's pronounced more like a J sound, a J, as in, there's not really an English equivalent, but Jeep was the closest thing that I could come up with. So J, Jeep, Jeep. It's kind of like that J sound, but there's no J in English really. All right, and then some places, I think Chile, it's more like a sh. So in Chile, it's more like a sh. All right, and then there are things that happen when it's in the middle of a word. This is usually at the beginning. The double L at the beginning is going to sound like a j. There are places where the double L, if it's like in the middle of a word, like pollo, will sound like an ly. So usually it'll sound like pollo or pollo or pollo, but pollo. So sometimes a variation will happen. So the example where it sounds like a Y would be like me llamo, or me llamo, me llamo, and then pollo. So those are variations that happen. So if you hear that, just understand that that's the kind of stuff that happens between different countries. All right, Enye is pronounced like the NY in canyon, for words like señor, niño, etc. Q will sound like the English K, and it will usually always be followed by a U. The only exception where I have seen it where it wasn't followed by a U was in a transliterated version of a book that I'm not sure is very accurate. So Q. So Q will always sound like a K, as in quinto, quiero. Quinto, quiero. So you don't pronounce the U. When it's joined with a Q or a G, it just changes the pronunciation of that to whatever it is. Like Q would be K and G would be G. All right. R at the beginning of the words is the famous R sound. Yeah, we went over that. That's kind of repeated. Single R comes between two vowels. It sounds like English D. Okay, so a single R in the middle of two vowels will sound more like a D, like pero. Pero means but. Like, I want to do this, but I can't. All right, S in some dialects of Spanish is deleted. It's aspirated. It's completely removed from the word. So, for example, buenas tardes. In Puerto Rico, you will hear people say buena tarde. buena tarde. And I had a teacher who was from Puerto Rico, and he would always enter and he would say, buena tarde. And he always called me Pepe, but he was a cool guy. And he also spoke French. And then nosotros would be nosotros. 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 W may be called W, B W, V W, or W, depending on where you're at. And usually I've only heard W or B W, but these other ones exist in other countries. X, we went over this in the alphabet, but I'm going to try to touch on that a little bit. X will sound like the English X when it follows a vowel, like for example in the word éxito, which means success. In some words like Mexico, it's pronounced like an H because it is from a different language. I believe it's from Aztec language, the Aztec language. And a lot of the names in Mexico come from the indigenous people that live there, and Mexico is no exception. So Mexico comes from Aztec, and so that's why it's pronounced Mexico and not Mexico. You might see it with a J, Mexico, and some people will write it with a J. Okay, and then if X comes at the beginning of the word, it will sound like an S or possibly a TH, as xilófono. Alright, so if X comes at the beginning of the word, it might be pronounced as an S, as in xilófono or xilófono, depending on where you're at. Y is usually referred to as Y. We already went over this. In some countries, it may also be referred to as Y. So in some countries, Y might be called Y. But in general, it's called Y, which means Greek I. So I, E, and then Grega, which is Greek. All right, and then Z, which is Zeta, pronounced as Zeta or Theta, depending on if you're in Spain. And it will be pronounced as the English S, but in Spain, they may pronounce it as a TH sound. So there's a word called casar, which means to marry. And there's a word cazar, which is to hunt. And so caza, cazar, and then cazar. So that's how you would tell the difference in Spain. But in Central and South America, they would just say cazar and cazar. So there is no difference. But this is generally something that happens in Spain where it sounds like a TH. All right, so that is the end of this one. So I just wanted to kind of go over the tips real quick, not in depth or anything like that. I just wanted to kind of, reiterate. Read books, articles in Spanish. You can get a journal, write down vocabulary, write down the definition while you say it out loud. Watch movies in English with Spanish subtitles and Spanish with English subtitles, and even in Spanish with Spanish subtitles. And then I wouldn't recommend putting your device in Spanish until you have a higher comprehension level. Listen to podcasts and books or lessons in Spanish. Audible is a good source. Set aside time to study every day. This is important. Study. You have to study, because you can sit there and listen to stuff, but if you're not studying, then you're not utilizing all of your senses. You have to use all your senses. Write stuff down, read it, hear it, listen to it, speak it, and then try to create your own dialogue in your head. Try to start thinking in Spanish. If you think flashcards are helpful, use flashcards. Make friends on social media. So this can help you practice, number one, and just make sure that the people are not crazy and weird. But this will also help you to think clearly and to think quickly when you are in a situation where a conversation is arising and you don't know what the person is going to say. So you have to think on your feet, so to speak. All right, this is a good thing to do. Just make sure they're not weird. So join Facebook groups. There's a bunch of Facebook groups that are geared towards Spanish and other languages, and YouTube and Rumble. So join Facebook groups and subscribe to Spanish YouTube channels, also Rumble channels. Get books in Spanish on topics that you love to learn. Bilingual books are good. I have a bunch I'm going to share in the last video. This is an example I shared in the last video is Spanish stories, cuentos españoles. It has English on one side, Spanish on the other, so it tells you the same story in English and in Spanish, and so you kind of get the idea behind it. It's good to kind of build that if you're at a lower level of Spanish, but Once you get up to a higher level, it's better to read in all Spanish, to listen to all Spanish, and to study books that are all Spanish. And I'll get into that after the quiz and explain that a little bit more. And the last thing is to enjoy the process. Don't worry about not getting what you are learning. Don't worry about if you don't understand a certain concept. If you don't understand it, just take a break. Go get some tacos. Go get some churros. Go get a drink. Go get a margarita. Go get something, and then come back to it and just start when you're in a better mood. Learning is more beneficial when it's enjoyable. If it's not enjoyable, you're not going to want to learn it. It's going to be a chore and you're not going to want to do it. So just enjoy the process and don't worry about not getting what you are learning right away. Just enjoy it, and you're not going to be perfect at it. You're not even perfect at English. I'm not perfect at English, and I've been speaking it my whole life. You're not going to be perfect at Spanish, so don't worry if you mess up. Don't worry if you forget something. Just relax. Enjoy it. Find stuff that you enjoy, put it in Spanish, and enjoy it. This is how you're going to learn, and it's going to be more enjoyable. All right? So don't get upset. Go get some tacos, go get some churros, come back, enjoy the process. Let's do this. So hopefully this helps. There's going to be one quiz video after this, and then I have an announcement after that, because I decided this morning that I'm going to do something that is slightly different than what I've been doing. And so we'll get into that after the quiz. All right, so my name is Joseph. This is Elemental Codes, and I will see you in the quiz. Hasta luego. Ciao, ciao.